Football is down for the count, D1 football, but not totally out so far. Will the NFL survive? And will COVID also be crowned the champ of the whole football world and baseball too? Hello, I'm Phil Van Horn. Welcome to AAI, the podcast about analytics and sports. Here are my colleagues, Andrew and Ari. Andrew's a data scientist down in San Diego. Hello, Andrew.
Hey, Phil. Hey, Ari.
And Ari is joining us from the heart of Big 10 territory. He's the one of the world's leading AI evangelists. He's in Chicago. Howdy, Ari.
Hi, everyone.
Well, guys, just in time for our Tuesday podcast, we got it all. Big 10 and Pac12 say no football this fall. Already the Pac12 says they're postponing all sports until the new year, till January 1st, when we would normally here in Pasadena be watching those Rose Bowl floats go down Colorado Boulevard. Not this year. The parade was canceled. Now the game's canceled. The Big Ten's exploring maybe playing in the fall or in the spring. Pac-12 is going to play in the spring. The SEC and ACC want to play. The Big 12's not sure. And the players now have a voice at the table. All right, guys. Andrew, you go first. You grew up in the Minneapolis-St. Paul, Twin Cities area. What in the world's going on here?
It's really hard to tell, right? I mean, the Big Ten just a week ago was talking about just modifying the schedule. This is clearly changing really fast. At the same time, I can't say I was surprised, right? We saw the dominoes begin to fall when smaller Division I conferences began bailing out on the season. And we've been hearing rumblings from college professors all along of how can they force their players to play if I don't think it's safe enough to bring my students back on campus. And so I'm sure all of that played in to some extent, but there's clearly lots of people not happy with this decision as well.
You referenced the two conferences, Mid-American Conference and my Ball State Cardinals, Mountain West, and that's the San Diego State Aztecs. We also have a family interest in the Boise State Broncos. We're BSU people. And Pac-12. Wife works in the other end of the house. She's a Trojan, USC. You know, Andrew, we haven't said a thing about the elephant in the house over Ari's shoulder. What in the name of Alex Agassi is going on there? Can you guys name a really traditional Northwestern football person other than Alex Agassi? Exactly.
I was thinking Joe Marty, but different sport.
But, you know, Northwestern's been to the Rose Bowl much more recently than IU or Purdue or Minnesota. So we give the Fighting Kitties a lot of credit. Ari, the players have a voice at the table right now. That's something that has evolved. What does that mean to today's athlete or to the sport?
Yeah, well, there's on the field and kind of off the field. Clearly if their health is concerned, whether it's concussions or COVID or other, something that they could, bring up and have a say. Andrew mentioned the word domino. One of the other things I'm thinking related to the students and athletes is, you don't play this year, if it's football or fall sports, what happens next year? What if students take deferments? 20% of Harvard, we're talking not athletes, just the undergraduates, 20% of the freshmen are deferring. So what happens, you get a logjam. You have potentially, multiple people competing for the same spots. Is it a benefit for being, Pac-10 and so on? Is it something where some of the smaller schools might be able to recruit better athletes since there's that log jam? So yeah, a lot of thoughts. And then scholarship-wise, is the school expected or legally bound to pay scholarships or not? School by school basis. Those are some of the student issues I can think of.
Well, my mind's racing here, guys, and I'm going to line this up for you because I want you to address it. Pac-10, Big 12 make a decision today. or Pac-12 and Big 10. Big 12 next domino, as you say. SEC, ACC tweeted today or announced that their intent is to play. What does that mean for, one, the NFL on down the road? And then, Andrew, overall, what does this mean for the gaming industry if there is zero college football all fall and not until next March, April, May, June?
Yeah, well, I think there's a couple pieces there. We need to talk about the college side, and we allude to what happened in the dominoes that fall. Once we've talked about it, I would like to propose an alternate take on what just happened. And this feels a little conspiracy theory to me, but this was sent out by Matt Hayes, a college football writer at the Bleacher Report, who said he received the following text from a Power 5 college athletic director. And I quote, "You and your colleagues are chasing the wrong story. The virus alone is enough to stop the season, but presidents are terrified of players organizing. It's the paradigm shift to change amateur sports. You potentially lose one season with the virus. You lose the entire framework of your mission statements with players organizing. They need time to figure out how to attack it." And so we know there's been a lot of pushback at the organizations that happened. Interestingly enough, Pac-12, Big 10 were among the places where the students seem to be leading the charge. And we know there's a huge amount of money at stake for the universities. Not playing this year is going to place a huge burden on the budget of athletic departments across the country. But at the same time, if the players organize and change the game, that's going to change everything as well. And this undercurrent has been growing for quite a while. We've heard rumors about players trying to organize walkouts at March Madness, for example, or other big time events. What seems to be happening is the players have finally discovered they have a lot of power, and that power is simply by not playing. And so I think it's a really interesting what's going to come of this, because maybe athletic departments are doing this to give in to the protests from their players to allow them to avoid this, but it doesn't feel like this problem's going away. And in fact, I really expect college athletics to look very different coming out of this. So that's kind of a broadly cultural thing about where college is. From a gambling point of view, this is devastating, right? I mean, college football betting is immense. I mean, we know what happened to all of the bookmakers over the 3-month shutdown we saw before, right? I mean, they lost hundreds of millions of dollars in every single state that has legalized betting, probably billions in Vegas. So, yeah, this is just going to continue the pain there. And if this tells us something about the NFL and the NFL's likelihood of playing, or if many more players decide to opt out in the NFL because of this, it could have the same effect.
Boy, Andrew, you read my mind. Ari, what do you think the chances are the National Football League Players Association becomes even more, well, has a bigger ask for player health now that college football has stopped? What do you think the chances of that are?
Yeah, I'm kind of hearing the college, going back to school is tough for, classroom settings. But then, looking if you can have kind of like a bubble, seems to be holding up effectively. So there may be a chance to, at least attempt a pro NFL season, maybe more stringently than Major League Baseball. But, that was after, tough negotiations of Major League Baseball and the Player Association, where there are many other factors at stake. And, players are not only playing now with a concussion option, big chances of that. And football careers are much shorter than baseball careers. So the players may be more incented to try to get this year in. I'm bad at numbers, go figure, but I don't know. I'd put it less than 50% that they have a season.
Wow. Andrew? We're going to have an NFL season. Is this going to knock out SEC, ACC, Big 12, college ball, and NFL?
I wouldn't be surprised. I think the odds are well over 50% to turn Ari's projection around. I'm saying the same thing, but I'm saying the odds of it not happening are much higher than 50%. We already know the colleges have had problems with COVID outbreaks within the teams once they've brought the players back to campus. We've seen minor problems in the NFL. We expect to see more of those problems. We know baseball has had problems because of people not following the rules. That's tough when you have 30 people you're worrying about, or maybe 35 with this travel staff. When you begin talking about, 75 people you need to worry about to allow a football team to function, the odds just go up. And we know going into that locker room, going onto that bus seems to be really risky, as we've discovered from Major League Baseball. I don't know. And I also worry because baseball probably could have done a bubble if they had really wanted to. It would have been harder than basketball, but they probably could have pulled it off. I don't know how you do it in the NFL. There's just too many people. Where would you even host it? So I worry that we're not going to see it. They may try to start, but I'd be really surprised to see it finish.
Well, NFL fans may want to take a look at what's happening in Major League Baseball and how the teams are dealing with it or not. Most of the MLB teams have played 15 games so far. That's the quarter pole of a 60-game sprint. And we're learning that the Major League Baseball might adopt a bubble-style end to the playoffs, likely utilizing here in Southern California, where the Dodgers play, Angels play, and the Padres once they get past the first round of the playoffs. That could be really interesting. Ari, when you first heard of a bubble for MLB playoffs, I think Jeff Passan maybe reported it first, ESPN. What was your thought about that?
Well, I think it makes a lot of sense. One of my high school friends is in charge of security for the NBA bubble, but you catch it. As you may have heard, going to casinos, going out to restaurants. You could get it catching Ubers. I think one player rented a car from Hertz and got it there. The more that you could stay put and interact with as few people physically as possible. When I heard bubble in Major League Baseball, I thought that makes sense. If there's no bubble, and during a playoff or whatever that someone gets COVID, you may miss 4 games, and then during the regular season you might make up some or live with cancel games, but in the playoffs you just can't do that. So if you want the playoffs and World Series to be pushed back until January by having it delayed, don't have the bubble. If you want to try to have something wrapped up in October, November, then I think you need that bubble.
More baseball. Commissioner Manfred suspends Houston hitting coach Alex Cintron 20 games and A's center fielder Ramon Laureano 5 games for their fight on Sunday night. A's 9-game winning streak finally stopped. You guys hear about that game last night? Incredible. Angels beat the A's 10-9. That was a wild one. Trout hit 2 homers. Rendon homer. Ohtani homer. That's really amazing. Trout also the game-winning homer in that. Speaking of the Astros, one of our favorite topics. You guys take a look at how Altuve, Springer, and Bregman are hitting these days?
We asked this question at the beginning of the season, didn't we?
Yeah.
Yes.
So Altuve and Springer are under the Mendoza line, and Bregman just above, hitting .224. They're not alone. I mean, that's a theme in Major League Baseball, but just saying after 15 games, and in fact, Altuve is really struggling right now. The opposite of the 15, Cardinals have only played 5 games. And we just learned this weekend that manager Mike Schultz said some players have had ER visits because of COVID. Cards last played July 29th. But, I mean, the Marlins sat out, nearly 10 days, came back and played with a bunch of hodgepodge pickup guys. They're doing okay. That'll be a fascinating thing to watch. Here's what we're talking about. The American League Central is totally fascinating to me, guys. The Tigers and White Sox, fun to watch. The Twins in Cleveland, they're contenders. They're in this thing because they're playing well. Of course, Cleveland's pitching really well. And then Ari's guy, Kansas City, and manager Mike Matheny, they're competing well. They're in last place in the AL Central, but it's only -5 run differential. That means they're competing. Matheny's a recent student for Ari's analytics class. We talked about that. Mike's hitting Whit Merrifield leadoff, makes sense, but Jorge Solar second. He's hitting 284. Solar is a big beefy 6'4", 235. He's got 5 home runs so far, hitting 286. Matheny's also utilizing his bullpen to match up his best arm with the top of the order. Clearly, he is playing a new game than different from the last 2 years he was at St. Louis.
Yeah, totally. I'm just thinking of Soler. When I was with the Cubs, we helped get him out of Cuba, which was a nice signing from for the organization, and just glad to see him playing. And the Royals have a couple of interesting players. Of course, Mike Matheny is kind of like the fun guy to watch, seeing his transformation. I went up against the Royals when I was with the Orioles, and we swept the Tigers, but got swept by the Royals. But yeah, I always respect your organization.
Now, Ari, hang on a second. I just set you up for your class. Let's talk about your class. What do you think Mike most benefited from taking your class that he's utilizing right now? And there were clearly 2 examples there, but you got to know him. He took your class. And anyone who's watching or listening to this, please go track down Ari on social and learn about his analytics class. But Ari, what do you think Mike gained most from taking that class?
And thanks for the plug, smww.org, Sports Management Worldwide. Teach one on baseball analytics. Have a bunch of former players and managers, former GMs, current players, current front office staff, and then also data science and analytics across all sports. But yeah, Mike, it was taking the class, and then it was like outside the class, doing mentoring and other discussions. It's at the highest level, the appreciation that you can get one more play could help with one more win, especially this season, but that could help you get to and through the playoffs. But, in the class, we talked about the technologies, Rapsodo, Driveline, Blast Motion, K-Vest, sensor or camera like TrackMan and Hawkeye, even though it was last year, talked about it. So an appreciation for what type of information you have, and then how it can help with in-game strategy. So like what you're saying, what lineup do you have? How do you defensively position the players? Do you bring in a relief pitcher with a certain type of pitch to face the top of the order in the 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th inning? So like how can you get the best information to help you make the right in-game strategy? And then everything else can't take any credit for, but Mike, his leadership and ability to talk to players, and especially in COVID situation, keeping everyone focused, knowing what they have to do to develop, how to stay engaged when you're stuck in your room. Those are some of the intangibles I think Mike had.
Well, there's all kind of good stories at this point. The quarter pole, the MLB season down in San Diego, Fernando Tatis Jr. Andrew, this guy's exciting to watch play. He plays hard. He really is probably the newest rising star in Major League Baseball. At the quarter pole, let's give him the Mike Trout Award. He's the first in MLB history to hit 30 homers and steal 20 bags in the first 100 games. He's fun to watch. Rocky shortstop Trevor Story, same thing. Really remarkable, talented athlete. Give him credit. Fastest shortstop to 100 homers in Major League Baseball history. He did it in a total of 448 games. A-Rod had that. He did it in 470. So Trevor Story deserves a lot of credit. The Rockies off to an impressive start despite Nolan Arenado with a slow start. We got to give Blackman some credit for that too. Now, guys, let's dig into some of the numbers. It looks like the ball may have again changed. Hitters are striking out more than ever before. Teams are hitting an all-time low 230. All right? What are the reasons for that? Let's go through some of these things and help me out, guys. More managers, and Ari, this is an analytic thing. Andrew, this is an analytic thing. More managers are cutting off their starting pitcher after 2 times through the order. Andrew, you've done the numbers on this, or you've done the numbers. 3rd time through the order means what for a starting pitcher that's not Clayton Kershaw in his prime or Scherzer on his best day healthy? What happens the 3rd time through?
If you don't, if you're not one of those elite pitchers, the batters have seen you. They've adjusted some of their timing. They see how you're performing that day. So a lot of times the batters adjust more than the pitchers adjust. Then again, yeah, like what you said, if you're an elite pitcher, you have the ability to adjust the 3rd time through. But, it's a sprint right now. So maybe having starting pitchers pitch fewer innings per start is the better way to win those individual games.
Andrew, as you watch the game, are you cognizant of end of the 2nd time through the order, about go through the top of the order again for a 3rd time? Is that something you are keeping an eye on?
Yeah, absolutely. I was a little surprised it happened. Well, I suppose surprised it happened isn't really the right word. I think the 60-game sprint changed things. Starting pitchers weren't ready to go 7 innings or 6 innings, so they've been being pulled a little bit faster. It's allowing the managers to do this probably with less spotlight than they would have otherwise. But I mean, this is just the natural consequence of the trends we've seen over the last few years. There's more and more amazing bullpen arms who are good for an inning. And managers have realized that, that top of the lineup against a tired pitcher or someone they've seen too many times, it's just better to bring in your top arm and let them go. So, yeah, you have to be watching for it. And I don't think this is going away when we get back to a normal baseball season either. I think it's just too tantalizing for managers.
Yeah, the bullpen makes a big difference. And a couple of the most successful teams so far are the teams that are fully utilizing their bullpens. Also, shifting defenses are hampering offense. Umpires are calling that low strike just below the strike zone that we can often see on TV. Those are reasons for it. So pitching is center stage, guys, for good and bad reasons. So pitchers are excelling, yet pitching injuries, not COVID, may decide who wins this World Series. The Athletic reports the pitchers are hitting the injured list 3 times more so far this year than any similar stretch last season. You can think of Verlander and Soroka, Kluber, Ohtani, Charlie Morton on the IL with shoulder inflammation. Now, we're going to flip that around. One team is an exception, right? And that's what we do when we look at things from an analytical point of view. The outlier here are the Dodgers. The Dodgers on pace to hit 109 home runs in 60 games. That's 10 more than Ari, go back to 1988 World Series champs. 10 more than that, and that team hit an entire 161 regular season games. So not only are Dave Roberts and the guys with an MLB best with home runs, their run differential right now, plus 40, pretty impressive. Now, they have their hands full with Story's Rockies and with Tatis and the Padres. Enter the National League West. And the National League, the National League West has 3 of the top 4 teams in the National League right now. That's going to be interesting to watch every time those 3 teams pair up in that West AL-NL West cluster.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's been amazing to watch, right? They're separated by just a couple games, and they've been swapping back and forth who is leading based on who's had the best run. And, the Diamondbacks and the Giants aren't that far out, 4.5, 5 games out. So, I mean, it's just competitive. Every game matters. You can't go into any of these games expecting to have an easy one. And with it this close, it's going to come down to injuries and, just a couple bad days.
Andrew, I'm looking at records, and Ari, I'm also looking at run differential, which is telling a story. And as a former coach, I look at that and it tells me some things. So I see a team up in the standings, but a very poor run differential. I know that doesn't last. Ari, you ever take a look at that when you're breaking things down?
I do, and interestingly, Andy McPhail, who's been with the Twins, as Andrew knows, the Cubs with me, the Phillies. We take a look at a lot of that, and run differential. It is important. It kind of shows how balanced out your pitching, defense, and offense is. But sometimes we find that a handful of games kind of skews it if there are blowouts. So we look at run differential, and then like taking away every team's number one, like blowout one way or another, and number two. And seeing how that looks.
Yeah, I think if you did that for the Cincinnati Reds, you'd find that they're right in things right now. That's one team that would benefit from that. All right, last question, but we're going to answer it at the end of our podcast. Is it better to bunt in extra innings with a man on second? We'll have that analytics answer. I'll have Andrew and Ari take their shot, and then I'll have that answer later on. That's our analytics stumper of the day. Well, Andrew, the gaming industry's enjoyed a bounce back in the month of July. Potentially a big payday ahead if the NFL can get back to work. And one example of that is the state of Indiana. Indiana Sportsbook utilized the return of Major League Baseball and the NBA to post a very healthy month of July.
Yeah, absolutely. So this came from Play Indiana, and they were really happy. They had a good July. We should note that $70 million they talked about in July is really 8 days of sports, right? Sports didn't come back until nearly the end. So that's really good. They're also talking, they've finally made it over $1 billion in total wagers placed in Indiana in the sports books. But the thing we have to keep in mind, while they were really happy, it was a great number. It was the best since they did in March. That 70 million is still set 90 down from July of last year. So it came back, but it didn't come all the way back. And more importantly, they said between March and July, looking at last year, they lost over $700 million in handle that they should have seen. So yes, stuff's coming back. It looks good. As long as sports keeps going, we know there's a pent-up demand. But there was a tremendous amount of money that was lost. And this is Indiana. Can you imagine what those numbers look like in Vegas?
Andrew, could you explain for people who may not know the competition between online market in a state like Indiana and competition with FanDuel and DraftKings?
Yeah, well, so that number, that 70 million, over 90% of that was online betting. And I think we're seeing that in a lot of the states that have sports betting. The vast majority is online. And many of these states set it up so that while it's online betting, it still goes through a physical casino. There is some real casino responsible for it. And some people may be familiar with this. If they go to Vegas, BetMGM exists. It handles the sports book for the MGM properties. But if you're thinking about Indiana, it's mostly going to be tribal casinos and such, and they're not large enough to really run their own book. So they partner with someone else. So BetMGM runs some, Caesar runs some. I think Betfair, I don't know if they're in Indiana, but I know the UK company also handles some of this. FanDuel's and DraftKings, interestingly enough, also run sports books for many of these. And in fact, the two largest casinos in terms of handle in July, one was FanDuel's and one was DraftKings. So they made their money, they made their name in daily fantasy, but they clearly see their future in this sports betting.
Well, guys, before we run out of time here, I want to talk one soccer note. European football, Barcelona meets Bayern Munich Friday in the Champions League quarterfinals in Lisbon. And then MLS regular season returns. Ari, have you been able to keep with it? So the made-for-TV MLS is back and gone. That tourney's over. that was really a made-for-TV exhibition, right?
Mhm.
Those didn't count. That's like NFL football preseason. Those are exhibition games. The MLS is really here, tourney, is in November, and the MLS Cup is December 12th. So more soccer there, and we love our football brethren, especially in Europe. And Andrew, we're counting on you to guide us through that. Love that. Now, Ari, you get the first crack at our dangling participle here. The question, to bunt or not to bunt, is the analytics question in extra innings with a runner on second. Ari, go first. Do you bunt or do you not? Yes or no?
I hate to say it depends, but if you need just one run, so if you're the top of the inning, yes, you bunt to try to just get that one run. If you're on the home team and you're down by one, you bunt to try to tie it up. If you're down by more than one run, you need base runners, so don't bunt.
Well, so extra innings, Andrew, runners placed on second, nobody out. Do you bunt or do you not bunt?
It's a really good question, but I'm going to turn it around to you, Phil, because you're our hitting coach. And I've watched a lot of baseball, and I've watched a lot of baseball players try to bunt. And right, growing up, I remember watching back in the 80s when people could lay down these beautiful bunts on fast artificial turf and actually make it work. Now I see so many people pop out on bunts, completely miss it. Are the players good enough to execute bunts today to make it a viable strategy? I agree with Ari's sentiment, but...
So actually, Andrew, you asked two questions. Are they good enough? Yes. But bunting upper 90s with movement up in the zone is hard even for really good bunters to do. Now, guys, I'm presenting this because Devin Fink tweeted over the weekend, expected runs, I'll read this, are better with a run on second and nobody out, not bunting him to third and having one out, okay? Unless you are the home team, and the home team could do it if the game is tied and if the bunter is really good. So what it's saying is, unless you have a guy who can really bunt and you're the home team and it's tied, don't do it. And there's a lot to this because I've seen guys who are really accomplished bunters today. And, Ari, some of the stuff is so nasty, they have no chance. They're lucky to foul it off and not strike out bunting. And that's really good big league guys. So it's hard. And in an obvious bunting situation, it's interesting to see how pitchers are attacking them, if they just want to go ahead and let them give up the out, or if they're going to challenge them and keep that ball up in the zone with movement. That is really hard to do. And that's puzzled me for a couple of years. And that's the answer. Pitchers are just too good. It's too hard to do it. So unless you're the home team, and unless the guy up is really good and will get it down and execute, don't do it. The win probability is way better, and runs expected or expected runs are way better with this runner on second. Go ahead and take your shot for 3 times with 3 outs. All righty. So fellas, I said this at the beginning before we started recording, I feel like we solved some international problems today with Division
More will come up.
Yeah, it's like Division I football, the NFL. Will we have the all of the things that are going on, along with the suspension in Major League Baseball? There's a lot going on, and it's possible we're going to see several weeks in a row like this because of this unique time in which we find ourselves. Agreed?
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah. Pick your next sport.
Yeah. And again, NBA playoffs start next Monday. Well, that'll do it for us this week. We're really grateful that you've been tuning in, and we want to once again say thank you for the increasing listeners and viewers that we've enjoyed over the last month to 2 months. Thanks for hanging out with us. I'm Phil in Pasadena. There's Andrew in San Diego and Ari in Chicago. What a delight it is to spend some time with you once a week here on AAI, the podcast about analytics and sports. You take care. We'll see you next week.